Okay, so the next thing we are going to configure is the SXP. So this is going to be between switch 1 and firewall 1. Okay, so let's first configure our switch. If we can find the terminal, there we go. So switch 1, first thing you do, let's look through the question mark. So you got row-based SGT and XXP. So the first thing you need to do is turn on XXP and globally with the SXP enable command. And then you have to set a couple of default settings. So first default, with your default, set default password to say Cisco. It's going to use this password when it tries to pair up with the firewall. So the other default you need to do is source IP. We're going to tell it to source it from this loopback IP, which is 1601. Okay, now you have, so we did default, we did enable, so next we do connections. So we need to specify the peer IPs, which is the firewall, and its IP is 172.16.0.2. Actually it's 10.2. And for the password, we will tell it, please use the default that we set, and mode. So it's to peer right now. For the switch, you can access both listener or speaker. So when you configure this, one side is supposed to be speaker, which is the site that's sending out the IP to SGT mapping information, which is a switch. And the other side is just the listener that basically received that information. So for here, mode peer, so the firewall here is going to be a listener. So specify that as a listener. Okay, so maybe there's a couple more commands that you can do as a, this is optional, which is one is reconciliation timer that you can set, or period, or even the retry. So when it tries to retry, keeps retrying, we're trying to discover the peer. So here we can lower, let's say we want to lower the retry period to say 10 seconds. Okay, let's just review our configuration real quick before we move on to the firewall. Okay, pretty straightforward. There's not that much configuration you need to do. Now let's move over to the firewall. The command is almost identical on the firewall, so before we do anything, let's make sure we can ping. No do here. Ping 172.16.0.1, which we could, so we know that's good. Now we do STP CST SXP and enable globally. Default password Cisco, and then default source 172.16.10.2, which is the inside interface. Okay, 10.2, and now we built the SXP connection with the peer being 172.16.0.1. Password, use the default, and mode peer. And peer, which is a switch, is a speaker. Okay, let's match the retry period as well. So retry period. I think it's command is ambiguous. You have to type it all out. So retry period 10. Okay, now if you go back to the switch and do show CTS SXP connection, you can see right here the connection status is now on. Otherwise, it would say something like pending. So we know it's currently speaking, and sure enough, if we go to it's XP connection on the firewall side, it should also say on right here being a listener. Okay, so now that the switch and the firewall is communicating over SXP, so if you're trying to look up the SGT mapping on the firewall, you can see the firewall has received that mapping we just saw earlier in the switch. And you can see the source is said it was being learned through the SXP. Okay, so the IP address of our client over here and the mapping to the SGT tag 100. All right, so now the firewall knows about the tag. We can basically use that tag and construct a access control list for ACL. So now we go back here and let's say do ping google.com, and let's just have that running in the background. And currently on the firewall, we do not have any ACL configured. Okay, let's make sure. So now we can go ahead and configure using the tag value 100, and this is going to be the network admin, and we would like to enable or allow HTTP only. Okay. So to do that, in the Cisco in the ASA version 9, there's a new security object group type called security. This is for security group. So we first going to use the object group to create this, and just like any other kind of object group like network, it works pretty much the same way. So let's say this one is going to be, call it network admin question mark. Now we do security group, and you can either do name or tag. Since we haven't really configured ASA to talk to ISE to download all the names and tag mapping, here we're just going to use a simple tag value of 100. Okay, although it comes back and said cannot really reference tag 100, that's because the name to tag mapping is not there, which is fine. And we'll see how that changed later once we have the ASA communicate with ISE. Okay, so now we're going to create our access list. Call it from inside. Make sure we don't want to deny any critical traffic, for example, like DNS. So first we're going to make sure we allow DNS, which is 53, and NTP, which is 123. And now we're going to permit TCP with the object group. And you can see, other than in addition to the regular object group, there's also an object group security, which is what we want. So object group security, and we're going to reference that back to, let's see if we can find the name up here that we created for the object group. I think we just went past that right here. Okay, with the question mark, you can still specify the source IP if you want on top of the SGT. But for us, it would be redundant, so we're just going to do any because we no longer want to do it by source IP. And then we still follow this, just going to follow the same syntax, which is the destination IP, and we're going to leave it at any. And we'll make sure we're just going to allow port 80 for HTTP. Okay, so enter. Let's take a look at the access list real quick, make sure everything looks good, and now we're going to apply that to the interface with the access group command. Let me copy and paste the name from inside direction interface inside. Okay, so go ahead and apply that. Let's see if there's anything changed over here. You can see immediately our ping drops because as far as the ASA is concerned, it's only allowing HTTP from this particular host. So now if you go back to I'll try the web browser. And you can see the web browsing, which is HTTP port 80, still work. Okay, and we go back to firewall 1 access list, and we are expecting a bunch of matches with the hit count 22. So we know that the traffic from this particular client is hitting this rule when it tries to browse the internet. And here you can see the tag 100 is shown as unknown, and again that will change in a little bit. Alright, so that's just basically a simple ACL construction just based purely on the raw value of the SGT. Now we're going to see if we can make the configuration a little more readable or easier to configure by having the tag and name mapping. And right now the only entities that knows about the name is the ISE that we configured. So here going back to policy results with the security group access and the security group. As you can see here, this is the name, this is the tag. And now we're going to get the ASA to download all these values so we can incorporate the name as part of the ACL instead of using the actual tag number or tag value. Okay, so the first thing we need to make the ASA known to ISE, and the way to do that is just like any other network device, is to add network device. And here click add, name, firewall 1, IP 172.16.10.2. Everything else we just leave at default. We didn't really create a group for it. Radius password is Cisco. Scroll down a little more, and this is a section we never visited before, which is the TrustSec settings. And by default, it has the box checked for using the device ID for the SGA identification. Password, same Cisco. And it's some of the timers that you can tweak as far as how often you want the firewalls to download or updates the information that it receives from ISE. So by default, they are set to 1 day. For example, download what they call environmental data, and that's the term. So instead of 1 day, just for our lab purposes, let's make it 1 minute. And I can download peer authorization policies. Let's also do that 1 minute. Reauth, let's leave it 1 day. Download SGACL list. Since we don't really deal with this, we can just leave it at 1 day. Okay, and here there's a notify device if anything on SGA configuration change. We can check that box just to make sure. And here, if you were to configure the security tag to IP or device mapping, then you need to check this box. The way ISE works is it will SSH into the egress device or device that you configure right here, and it will push down that settings to the device. But since we're not dealing with that, we can skip this section. Okay, and then save or submit. Okay, next for ISE to trust the ASA or ASA to trust ISE, we need to generate a pack. So click generate pack that we're going to import to the ASA. Encryption key, it's just going to have to meet the complexity. So we're just going to do Cisco 123. And let's say lifetime is 1 year. That's fine for now. Generate. Okay, we're going to save the file, and we're just going to probably dump it on the desktop. Right here, firewall pack, save. Okay, now we're going to need to get the ASA to pull out this file. So currently I have a FTP server running. Clear that, which is currently pointing to the desktop for the root directory. So we're good since we put the file on the desktop. Now let's do some configuration on the ASA. So ASA also needs to use ISE as a radius server. So we're going to configure a AAA server. Let's call it ISE with protocol radius. AAA server ISE. By default, use inside interface. There's no need to specify. And the IP of ISE. Enter. We know we use the radius key Cisco. And let's adjust the timeout to 2 seconds. Right, and now the command that you need is CTS server groups ISE. Okay, alright, now it's time to import the pack. The command for that is CTS. With the question mark, you have 2 options, import pack or refresh. So here we want to import the pack, and we said it's going to be an FTP. And we'll create a user account, Cisco at the IP of 32.40. And we know the file name is called ftp1.pack. Question mark, it asks for the password, and this is the password we use to encrypt the pack. And we make it Cisco 123. Okay, enter. You can see pack imported successfully, and we also see the log on our FTP server as well. Okay, so just to verify, you can do show CTS pack. And here, if you remember the beginning of the video, we make a little EFAST setting adjustment to change the name to LM-ISE1. And this is where it shows up. Okay. So here right now, Firewall has successfully received the pack credential. Okay. Now if you go back to ISE, you can see there's something that we've never seen before with the CTS request. This is, if you click in, this is where the ASA is trying to push out the environmental data to, the ISE trying to push that environmental data to ASA, and at the same time it uses pack to authenticate. So since it's green, we know it's successfully authenticated, and as well as the data has successfully been pushed out to ASA as well. Okay, so we click on this tab, you can see the radius status is SGA data download succeeded. The network device is the firewall, and here's a bunch of information. So we know when it's green, it's good. So now we go back to the firewall and do a show CTS environment data. You can see the status active. The last download was successful. You can even tell you the last update time. And if you want to see what kind of data it got downloaded, Here, just the environmental data SG table, and now the firewall knows about the name to SGT mapping, or it's SGT table basically. Okay, and if employee is 101, it even tells you its reserve value. Network admin is 100 and server is 102. Okay, so now if you go back to our access list, you can see before the tag 100 said, let's see, was it unknown right here. And now since the tag 100 is known, the name is known, it's a name is a network admin. Okay, so now let's play around with the updates a little bit, or if you want to update the SGA value a little bit. So let's say we want to, let's go ahead and remove the server and delete. Say delete selected. Then OK. Now it's deleted, but let's see if it gets updated immediately to firewall 1. You can see the server 102 is still there, so it might take a little bit of time for, there you go, so it just went away. But at the same time, let's add it back. I'm going to show you there's also a way to force the data or the ASA to go out and download that information from ISE. So let's add that back with the server set value of 102. Save. Do a quick one. Okay, 102 is not there. You can force it with the refresh environment data. And I say database updated, and now you can see that server SGT 102 reappears immediately as soon as you issue that command, because you just tell the firewall to go out and fetch it from the ISE. Alright, so now that we have a complete knowledge of the name to SGT mapping, let's go ahead and complete our ACL. So we still have 2 more ACLs to configure for employee and the server. So we're going to continue with the access list. Inside, instead of using the object group security this time, we're just going to do it inline. So permit, we said for the employee, we're just going to allow ICMP. So ICMP, do question mark. There's an option for security group. And we can either use their tag or name, but since now the firewall has knowledge of the name, and use the name, and that would be employee. Make sure there's no typo. And source IP any, destination any. Okay, so just want to allow ICMP. And now we have to do one for the server. So server, actually it's we want to make sure we want to update that from ICMP to IP. Server any. Okay, let's do a quick check. So permit security group name employee any, and then security for the IP security group name server any. Okay, now that we have the access list in place, we can go back to our test machine and lock out. So lock off. We'll log back in with this time employee 1. Alright, so we're now logged in. And let's go back on the switch and check. Okay, so now you can see before it was 64, now it has become 65, it's just 1 up, so instead of 100, it becomes 101. If we do show CTS role, SGT all, and just as we expected, the SGT value changed from 100 to 101, although the IP address stays the same because we used the same machine to test. And if you do show CST SGT in the firewall side, that same value gets propagated from the switch to the firewall as well. Now to do the actual test, we said the employee one is supposed to have a ICMP access only. Although this might not make sense in real life, but for the demonstration of our labs, let's see, ping. So you can ping no problem, but when you're trying to go to, let's say, google.com or internet, it's not loading up. If you go back to the firewalls and do show access list, we can see for the employee, tag 101, there's a hit count, which is the number of ping we did, while everything else will be denied for this particular user. Okay, so the last thing we need to take care of here is the server that we have. So the switch we are not configured to do 802.1x authentication for the server. So what do you do when you have to deal with either static IPs or the device is not capable of 802.1x? So what we're going to do is to create a IP-to-SGT static mappings on this switch. And it's actually pretty straightforward. So we know that the server has the IP of 32.40. So what you do is the command CTS. So again, instead of having the SGT value created at the time of 802.1x authentication that was assigned from ISE, we can statically create that. So CTS row base SGT map, and we give it the IP. You can do the host name, but that's going to require DNS resolution. Just going to do by the IP. And we want to map that to the SGT value of 102. And just like that. And if you do show CTS row base, SGT map all, you can see now one that said local, and the one we just statically created is called, for the source, it has CLI. But it shows up in the same table with the SGT value of 102. That means if you go to the firewall and do show CTS SGT, and the firewall now has knowledge of that static mapping as well. Well, although the firewall doesn't really know the actual source of that mapping, all they know is the mapping was learned through the SXP protocol. So now we go to the server. Actually, before we do that, let me take that out one more time so we can kind of compare before and after. So as soon as we apply that, okay, take that out. It's gone now. So as soon as we apply that access control list on the ASA inside interface, we can allow internet connectivity on our server here. Okay, so you can see it cannot access the internet right now, and that's because it's currently not allowed by the ACL. So now we're going to put the static mapping back. It will come back to the server. You can see now the server has complete access to internet because we have a permit IP any for the SGT of 102 of the server. Okay, right here, server tag 102, hit count 18. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of moving parts in this whole implementations. And if you guys are familiar with like identity firewall, you can see the concept is very similar. So for identity firewall, the ASA actually communicates with an agent that's installed on the domain controller to get the IP to user groups or AD groups or user mapping informations, which is very similar to what we do here with the IP to SGT mapping information. In fact, the two can coexist, the security group based access list and the user group or the user based access list for the identity firewall. So they can actually coexist on the same access list. Okay, just to reiterate, this is not really a full-blown TrustSec setups where you actually do the SGT tagging with the packets and even the MACsec encryption. This is merely just using the SXP as a protocol transport, the IP to SGT mapping, just to get around the fact that our switch here doesn't support or is not TrustSec hardware capable. Okay, but nonetheless, this allows us to kind of explore the SGA configuration or capability on Cisco ISE. Okay, so that's pretty much wraps up our video on Cisco ISE 1.1 security group access and the ASA version 9.1 TrustSec integration. Thank you for watching LabMinutes.com, and I'll see you guys in the next video.